Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. Jim Rohn. When Jim Rohn said, "Motivation is what gets you started, habit is what keeps you going," he condensed into one line one of the most important truths about success, growth, and the human condition. At its core, this quote reveals the relationship between two powerful forces, motivation and habit. Motivation is the spark, the initial burst of energy that pushes us to begin something new. It is the emotional surge you feel when you listen to an inspiring speech, read a life-changing book, or decide one day that you want to improve your health, your finances, your career, or your relationships. Motivation can be triggered by pain, the realization that your current situation is no longer acceptable, or by pleasure, the vision of what life could look like if you achieve your goals. For instance, someone might be motivated to start exercising after seeing their reflection in the mirror and not liking what they see, or after watching a documentary about longevity and health. Motivation can also come from external influences, like encouragement from friends, or internal reflections, like imagining the kind of person you want to become. This energy is powerful, but it is also fleeting. Motivation alone cannot carry you across the finish line because human emotions fluctuate. One day you might wake up excited and ready to take on the world, and the next day you might feel tired, distracted, or unmotivated. That is where habit enters the picture. Habit is the discipline of repeating an action so consistently that it becomes automatic. While motivation is emotional, habit is mechanical. Motivation is the intention, but habit is the system that ensures progress continues regardless of how you feel in the moment. When Rohn draws this distinction, he is reminding us that we cannot rely on feeling good to do good. We must build habits that sustain us long after the spark of motivation fades. Consider the example of someone who wants to write a book. The initial motivation might come from a brilliant idea that strikes them late at night or after reading a novel they admire. That energy is enough to get them to buy a notebook, download writing software, or even draft the first few pages. But the journey of writing an entire book is long and often tedious. Without the habit of sitting down daily or weekly to write, no matter how small the progress, the book will remain unfinished. Habit takes the wheel when motivation runs out of fuel. The same is true for fitness. Many people feel motivated on January 1st to hit the gym as part of their New Year's resolution. The gyms are crowded in the first week of January, but by February, most of those people have quit because their motivation wore off. The people who continue going are not necessarily more motivated, they are more disciplined. They turned exercise into a habit, something they do regardless of whether they feel like it. Habits turn actions into identities. When you have the habit of exercising regularly, you stop saying, "I am trying to get fit," and start saying, "I am a fit person." When you have the habit of writing daily, you stop saying, "I want to be a writer," and start believing, "I am a writer." Motivation helps you dream of the identity, but habit helps you live it. Jim Rohn understood that human behavior is shaped by consistent repetition, not just occasional bursts of enthusiasm. Think about the power of brushing your teeth. You don't wake up each morning motivated to brush your teeth. You don't need to be persuaded by inspirational quotes about dental hygiene. You simply do it because it has become a habit. You know the benefits, but more importantly, it is wired into your routine. If you can treat your larger goals the way you treat brushing your teeth, not as optional acts dependent on mood, but as non-negotiable routines, you unlock the secret of lasting success. This is why building habits is more powerful than chasing motivation. Motivation can be the wind that fills your sails, but habits are the oars that keep you moving forward even when the wind dies down. Another way to understand this is to look at how professionals operate. Amateur athletes rely on motivation. They train when they feel inspired. Professional athletes rely on habit. They train every day, rain or shine, whether they feel like it or not. The same is true in business. An entrepreneur may start their journey motivated by the dream of financial freedom, but it is their habits, waking up early, planning their day, following through on commitments, learning continuously, that sustain their business through setbacks and failures. In life, setbacks are guaranteed. Motivation is not enough to carry you through rejection, delays, or hardship. But habits give you resilience. They anchor your actions to something deeper than fleeting emotions. It is also worth noting that habits, once built, actually create new motivation. This is the paradox Rohn hints at. You start with motivation to build a habit, but once the habit is ingrained, the habit itself fuels motivation. For example, when you consistently exercise, you begin to feel stronger, look healthier, and enjoy the sense of accomplishment. These results create fresh motivation to continue. But you would never reach that point without first relying on discipline to keep the habit alive. Similarly, when you build the habit of saving money, at first it feels like sacrifice. You are motivated by the vision of financial security. Over time, as you watch your savings grow, the habit itself becomes rewarding, which reignites motivation to save more. This cycle, motivation leading to habit and habit sustaining motivation, is what drives long-term success. From a psychological perspective, motivation activates the emotional parts of the brain, but habits activate the procedural memory system. Habits run in the background like autopilot. Once you establish a habit, it requires far less willpower and energy than relying on motivation every time. Imagine if every morning you had to muster the same level of motivation just to brush your teeth, eat breakfast, or tie your shoes. It would be exhausting. That is why building habits around important areas of life frees up mental energy for creativity, problem-solving, and growth. Instead of constantly battling with yourself to get started, habits make progress effortless. This is why Rohn insists on the power of habit. It liberates you from being a slave to motivation. To apply this wisdom in your own life, you must first recognize where motivation has failed you in the past. Think about the goals you once felt passionate about but abandoned. Ask yourself, did I rely solely on motivation? Did I fail to build the habits that would have carried me through? If so, the solution is not to wait for more motivation, but to design systems of habit. For instance, if your goal is to read more books, motivation might inspire you to buy a stack of them, but unless you create a habit, like reading 10 pages every morning with your coffee, you will fall back into old patterns. If your goal is to get healthier, motivation might get you to buy new workout clothes, but habit is setting a specific workout time each day and treating it as an appointment you cannot miss. If your goal is to start a business, motivation might help you brainstorm ideas, but habit is sitting down daily to work on execution, no matter how small the step. The truth is, building habits requires discipline. And discipline is not always pleasant. It feels uncomfortable at first because you're rewiring your brain. But discomfort is temporary, and the rewards of good habits are permanent. Once a habit becomes ingrained, it takes less effort to maintain than it did to start. Jim Rohn often said that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. That statement perfectly complements the quote we're exploring. Motivation might push you to start practicing those disciplines, but habit ensures you keep practicing them until they bear fruit. This is why some people seem endlessly productive. They don't rely on bursts of inspiration, they rely on habits. Another important layer to this quote is its moral lesson about patience. In a world that celebrates instant results and overnight success, Rohn reminds us that real achievement is built slowly through the power of habit. Motivation creates excitement, but habit creates consistency. And consistency over time compounds into remarkable results. The person who saves a small amount of money consistently will end up wealthier than the person who saves a large amount sporadically. The person who writes 1 page a day will eventually complete a book, while the person who waits for big